What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be looking at hitboxes in Infinite Warfare, and more specifically, how your combat rig choice is going to affect your hitbox. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so just in case you aren't aware of what a hitbox is essentially the coded area where you can be shot or where you can shoot enemies. It doesn't always necessarily align perfectly with the player models. There might be certain areas that you can shoot directly through on a player, and there might be other areas where you can shoot like really close to a player and not technically right on his body, and you can still get a hit on him. Also, each body part has its own hitbox. So there's a head hitbox, there's a neck hitbox, upper torso, mid torso, lower torso, left arm, left foot, right foot, like all of those different areas. There's a lot of different hitboxes on a player model, and all of these hitboxes can have different multipliers to your bullet damage. So for instance, a headshot will typically deal a little bit more damage than a body shot. Now this year with the combat rigs, a lot of people have been concerned since the combat rigs look different, especially Synaptic. How does that affect your hitboxes in game? If you run Synaptic who's super skinny and has like no waist, is that making you a much harder target to hit than, let's just say, Merc for instance, because Merc is typically one of the bigger, bulkier combat rigs? And based on my testing, this doesn't appear to be the case, or at least there isn't a significant difference. If you guys want to, you can test this yourself. Use the VMC site and zoom in with it, so hold triangle to zoom in, and every time you're over a hitbox, your sight will light up yellow. So you can actually trace this hitbox with the VMC site. As soon as it turns yellow, that means you're on a hitbox. When it's not yellow, that means you're not on a hitbox and you won't get a hit. And you'll notice here with Merc, there are several areas where I can shoot through technically on the player model itself and not get a hit. So there's a few things like the thrusters, for instance, on his back. You can shoot right through those. They don't deal any damage to the character. And I've seen a few people complain about hit detection issues where really what's happening is they're just shooting through the thruster and they were missing their actual target. They weren't actually hitting a hitbox. And then there's other areas on there as well. There might be like the tip of his helmet or something like that that you can shoot right through. And also there's different customization packs that you can put on these combat rigs. And for some of them, they're much more bulky, but those don't seem to impact the hitbox at all. It'll just increase an area where you can actually shoot directly through your player model without doing any damage because it's technically not a hitbox. When we move on to Synaptic, you can see here right on his waist area, since he has that really small waist, a lot of people have been running Synaptic thinking that they'd be a much harder target to hit, and it turns out you can actually shoot near his waist and still get a hit marker. So the hitboxes extend a little bit beyond the actual character model for Synaptic to make it more balanced with the other combat rigs, because if the hitboxes were perfectly on the player model for Synaptic, I think it would be a little bit on the unfair side because he would be a lot harder to hit than the other player models. Now unfortunately this can cause a little bit of confusion in game though, because sometimes you could be like, hey, I didn't actually hit that shot. I was a little bit off target, yet I still got a hit. Or in the case of shooting at Merc, you might be like, hey, I was definitely on target there. Even if I was just like close to the edge of my target, I know I was on target and I missed a shot. This is simply because the hitboxes do not align perfectly with the player models. And this isn't really new to Call of Duty or even a lot of other first-person shooters. This is very common, but not to the same extent that we can see it in Infinite Warfare. Now I will say the positioning of the hitboxes seem to be a little bit different depending on the combat rig that you choose, but the overall size and area of the hitboxes seem to be identical or nearly identical no matter which combat rig or which outfit for your combat rig that you choose. Now having said all of this, it's very clear that there is at least a placebo effect that goes on with this. So if an enemy is using Synaptic, he does feel like he's harder to hit because he looks noticeably smaller, so you feel as though he's harder to hit than the other targets. This simply isn't the case based on all of my testing here. So for those of you guys that are running Synaptic specifically trying to avoid shots a little bit better, even though technically you have the same size hitbox or relatively the same size hitbox based on my testing, there still is that certain placebo effect, and it may actually help you a little bit because a lot of people get it in their heads in the middle of a gunfight, oh crap, this guy's a lot harder to hit, and it can actually screw them up a little bit and give you enough of an advantage to win that gunfight. So hopefully this video will kind of eliminate that placebo effect for you, at least when you run into something like a Synaptic. Realize that it has the same hitbox area as any of the other combat rigs, and you'll be just fine in a gunfight against them. Also, I hope this explains a few issues that you may have been having with hit detection or apparent hit detection issues. where you shoot through like the thruster pack of a Merc or something like that. Or maybe you shoot through the edge of his helmet going for a headshot, but you're not actually centered on that head hitbox. This is all that's happening. You're just shooting outside of the hitbox even though you're on the player model. And keep in mind, a lot of people are going to be like, well, that's just completely unfair because I shot him. I know I shot him. Technically, these areas that are outside of the hitbox are typically going to be areas that are like the edge of his helmet, for instance. It's not actually on his head. Or it's shooting through his thruster pack or something like that. So it's not completely ridiculous to think that you shouldn't get a hit and you shouldn't deal damage to the enemy if you're shooting through areas of his equipment or his outfit and not actually on his body himself. So there we have it. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. If you enjoyed it, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.